Tailwind. Everybody loves Tailwind, don't they? Or some people. It seems quite divisive. It seems people hate it or love it. I made a very fence-sitting video a little while back where I sort of said, like, it's an interesting idea and maybe there are some projects where it suits. I'd never actually used it. I was more looking from the outside and thinking about how I'd approach it. So setting up a new project, I kind of thought, let's give Tailwind a go. It's worth mentioning I listened to the Undefined podcast with the creator of Tailwind, and the main approach they talked about was, or the main solution they talked about that the Tailwind offers was making CSS development quicker and more fluid because of you takes away the pain of naming things, which has some merit to it if you think about you start styling together some box, some card, and need something. Okay, what is this? It's some content card, but then later on we might want to use it for a profile, so it's kind of just generic card. We'll just call this card. But then do you use some sort of inner naming system, so like card title, and then is this card subtitle? Well, I don't. This sometimes will contain subtitle, but sometimes it will contain something else. So maybe we'll call this card second or something. But then maybe later on that will move to the bottom. We'll put an extra title in. It's going to have like the date. So then it becomes that's the second. This is the third. So, okay, will it be card other title? You see very quickly naming kind of will get messy because you're having to define the context, and you're going to have to explain the reason for its usage. You kind of get very semantic with your labels, and that's all before you get into how you decide to group things. Are you going to use Sass and extend things? Are you going to chain multiple classes together? Are you going to kind of try and work off selectors and try and be more clever like that? They've all got potentials for going wrong. And I guess the idea of saying, well, we'll just skip all that altogether. We won't get any naming involved other than to just describe what it does. And we'll just chain lots of classes together to just describe visually what's happening. And things will be kind of components in themselves. Maybe they can have IDs, maybe they can be components within a React or whatever system, and they'll have their own context there. But in terms of styles, they're just going to have these utility names. The first thing is that they talk about installation being very straightforward. With PostCSS, you just run an npm install. It does though mention that, yeah, you'll probably find issues because of some of your other plugins won't be compatible, which is what I had. And then it uses flat map, which meant I had to upgrade Node, and I guess everyone has their own problems, but it's just versus a lot of things like Sass or any CSS framework where you just attach and run. This involved more work because of the build, but I guess that just depends on your setup. So once we're set up, the first thing you do, I've got my nested, I've got auto prefixer, and I've got Tailwind CSS set up. The next thing it suggests is I add these three to my site. So I find my styles, save the page. Haha, we're in. And there we go, it's in my styles. 3.9 megabytes of styles. So it's worth just having a quick look. So it's worth someone sort of pointing out that you can use a Purge Css plugin, which will run through your code and it will find all the things that you're not using in your HTML. It will strip those out, so these won't go to production, which you'd have to be thankful for, because of you'd look at all these variations of all the different space settings, the padding left, padding right, height settings, all these color settings. Just hundreds of these different variations with these little tweaks on the RGBA values. It makes sense these things won't go, but then some of them are going to be generic settings on HTML elements, so you probably do want to keep those in. They're like CSS resets, so some of it will, some of it won't. Also, just in development, do you really want every time you refresh a page to have to pull down 3.9 megabytes of styles versus even the biggest bloatiest CSS libraries would be like a Bootstrap. It probably doesn't go over a megabyte. So it's real kitchen sink territory, and if you're happy with just lumbering that around with you everywhere you go for every feature, do so. That's quite a hit to take up front. And this is really your new Bible, this page, because of you're no longer going to be going to any CSS reference files. You now, if you want to add any styles to your page, you're going to have to work off what the settings here. You're not going to know off the top of your head what the classes are. Maybe in time you'll memorize them, but initially, certainly you're going to have to keep referring to these things. So I want to begin by adding some margin to my page. Display, flex, grid, gap, margin. Go down here. Oh yeah. Let's start with so I want M2. I'm going to go with M2. So I'm going to go to my body, add M2. Let's come back to my page, and there it is, M2. It's set. So that's straight away the jarring thing is you're going to have to, now you're not touching a CSS file. You're going to, if you want to add classes to the HTML elements, if you want to add any style changes, you're going to just add it straight onto the template, because this is where our styles are going to be added. So that's a kind of mentally strange thing, that you have this style file you work from, but now you're just going to latch all these things on. It's also that thing about speed, that like, is that a lot quicker, me looking up margin, then looking up a class, then adding it onto the element? Is that a lot quicker than just coming up with my own class for that one setting and then applying that? I guess that's kind of unfair, because of there'll be a cumulative benefit that I've got a context of what an M2 is, and I can apply that in lots of places and have M2 in my mind. I don't have to think about numbers. I don't have to think about where that is in what style file. I know I've always got this M2, and if M2 changes its value, I can go set that in a configuration. So there probably over time would be some benefit, and maybe it's quite helpful if you're thinking in terms of design systems rather than specific components on files. But it's a little bit of a kicker early on to do so much like rooting around to find the thing, to reference the thing for one quick style setting. Okay. The next thing I want to do is add this lovely gradient off the back of my design. So it's this. I'm going to copy it. Now this is not going to be a Tailwind class that's available, because it's my own colors. I guess I probably can go into the configuration and set this as my base color and my main color, or give them special variables and then create a linear thing that can be applied as its own class. But that really sounds like an overhead. What I'd do is I'd go in here and say like body, background, linear gradient here. And let's come back. Here we are. And because my body is not got a height on it, it's just repeating over and over again. So I need the body to have 100% height. So come here. Height. I need a height 100% really. Height 100. H screen. Go H screen in here. Let's go back to my page. There we are. It gets to the point where you're kind of, the thing that's jarring for me is I'm adding one CSS setting here, or two, and now I'm adding another one here. And people might say to me like, yeah, well, that's just not the correct way to use Tailwind. You should go and add that configuration. But at this point, I'm starting to feel like there's going to be so much pain every time I want to make a tiny CSS change. I'm going to have to start digging through configuration files. I'm going to just have to do so much pre-learning before I can get, we're talking about the very basics of an outline of a page. All I've done so far is add a margin and a background color, and it's taken considerably longer than if I was just writing my own CSS. Okay, so the font I want is size 28. That's just all I've got in here is 28. I guess it's 28 pixel, but I'm quite happy to use a rem style setting. We'll come here, but I don't know how that converts. So if I go to like a rem calculator, I want size 28, meaning I need 1.75 rem. So that's 1.25, 1.5. Yep, there isn't one. 1.5 is the best I can get, I suppose. So let's go for, no, 1.875 is probably good, so I'm going to go text 3XL. Thing is, I want that not to just be on this one heading, because that would be quite painful to have to, every time I add a heading to the page, for it to have that. So I'm going to just add a general setting, my H1, H2. It's going to be like a global style here. So let's go. If you do this apply, you can then just directly add the styles on like that. Text 3XL. Back to my page. Again, someone will say, yeah, if you need 1.75, you can go add that in your configuration settings. There we go. I've managed to get my H1 of my page, or H2, to have 1.85, which is close to what I was going to have. It's actually 30 pixels. I wanted 28. And again, it's that thing of, maybe it's a problem that I was working off pixels, but the fact that you can see that configuration of, I need to work out the number, then go calculate it, then go back to my docs to get the number, to paste it in, to find the thing. I could really have just added a setting myself to say 1.75. So it's the idea of, what did the utility do for me? Next thing is, I need to add font weight bold. I know how to do this in CSS. It takes no time whatsoever. But at this point, I'm actually scared to do my own CSS because of you're branching away from using the convention. You don't want to kind of hybrid it. You either go Tailwind or you don't. But I'm also just thinking now, some CSS setting that I know how to do, it's very easy. Instead, I've got to intentionally go slower. I'm going to have to go to the font weight section to find the weight I want to, let's say I'm going to use semi-bold and come back. But this is not a very pleasant developer experience. You're intentionally, you're going to have to intentionally start doing things in a lot more of a kind of clunky style, and maybe there will be over time a shift that by doing this you kind of got this mechanical logical system, but really it just makes me kind of not enjoy designing an interface. Yeah, I'm going to pause it there. I mean, yeah, maybe for some projects this has some real strength, but on the face of it, having kind of trialed it a little bit, it just seems like there's a great deal of overkill here, that I don't need that many configuration settings. That once I get into my elements, it would be easier to just add a few base settings. Maybe some utilities would be good for some colors, for some spacing and things like that, and I'd be able to pull those down and use. You might find common things you need to add throughout projects, but pulling down a 4 megabyte library to add some CSS that is given to you natively anyway, I don't see the strength. I suspect it is for people that are scared of CSS, that they can just look to some docs and just pull in a common set of configurations. But I'm happy to be wrong on this. People please tell me the strength of Tailwind. I'll listen. That's all we got for now. Thank you very much.